We're here today with George Perkins. George, George has been in my life for over 15 years, right? The first time I attempted this recovery thing, George was there, right? And then when I decided to go back out and I was out there doing what I was doing, I would run into George. Los Banos is a small place, and he always showed me empathy, even though he knew I was out there, he always talked to me, took the time. And when I came back into the rooms, George was still there, right? And this guy's been a huge part of my story. A lot of things, he showed me, that you could have fun in recovery, right? Rock shows and all these different things. And, I love this guy right here, big part of my story. So, man, George, thank you for doing this.
Thank you for having me.
So like we started off, I always start off like, what's your clean date, George?
Not so anonymous with no, I can't do it. Not so anonymous with EJ Areca.
Wow. Well, my clean date is February 1st, 1995.
So you just had a birthday.
2 days ago, man.
28 years?
The grace of God.
That's pretty phenomenal.
Yeah.
So like, what does that day mean to you?
Man, it means a lot. It means the world. It gives me 2 birthdays. Haha. But that's the most important birthday of mine is my clean date. I love getting older every year, 'cause I'm coming up on 54 years as well, but my clean date is the most important birthday for me.
Right.
And day, really, because without my clean date, I wouldn't have anything else in the world. So
this podcast is brought to you by our friends at Sorensen's Ace Hardware, located at 402 Washington Avenue in Los Banos, proudly serving the community since 1947. Please check out our friend at Sorensen's for all your hardware needs. Come on, guys, support those who support us. Thanks, Sorensen's. Right. So, you haven't always lived in Los Banos.
Nope.
You were born and raised in the L.A. area, correct?
Yep, where the Dodgers live. I grew up in a city called Paramount, which was right next to Compton, and back in the 70s and 80s was pretty hectic, man. There wasn't a lot of white people back then. There was more, Chicano, Mexican, black people were coming in and this and that, and it was pretty hectic for me because I was born an only child, and so the thing is, when you're born an only child, you don't have any siblings or anything like that. You want to find, you want to be a follower, going to find kind of brothers and sisters, so to speak, people to hang out with, and I started out hanging out with the surfer stoner kind of bunch, right, and wherever I went, I never fit in, man. I just never fit in, and I went from that. Then I got into a Chicano gang. I got jumped in a Chicano gang at 15 years old, right? And I still didn't feel like I fit in, but it was just crazy, man. I was going from clique to clique, place to place, always trying to fit in, but never felt that I did, even though I might have been accepted, but I always had that little wrong thing, that Abby frickin' brain going, you just don't fit in here. And surfer, stoner, punk rocker, you name it. I was jack of all trades and master of none. So my first drug was alcohol, of course, for like many others, and of course marijuana. And I think I was about 11, 12 years old when I started that. I was way addicted before I picked up, though, with other things. What I was chasing was the numbness, right, of the feeling of not having a father, being left out of a lot of things, I remember I was in Little League at like 9 years old, 10 years old, and I didn't play baseball very, very well. I never hit the ball, stuff like that, just not having a father around. I could talk about that on the air because I've shared it with my sponsor, through the 12 steps, and I've been molested. I was molested as a boy as well, so trying to numb all those feelings, not being able to tell anybody, kind of holding all that for a lot of years, man, just made me chase drugs to numb those feelings.
Right. So starting with alcohol at 12, and then moving on. So you just learned, if I do this, I don't feel this.
Right.
And that just became the normal.
That's it. Yeah.
And so, man, it's so crazy. Like, thinking of when I started using at those early ages too. I think you were about a year ahead of me. And I look at my own kids and I'm like, man,
Yeah.
right. So like, where does that lead for you? Because I mean, that's like beginning of junior high, going into high school.
Yeah.
I mean, how does that start affecting your life?
Well, of course, it started affecting my school, you know, because, of course, partying with the party people, right? I'd go to school. I remember going to junior high, not even making it to class, but just sitting up in the bleachers. And that went all the way into high school, too, man. I remember trying to sell drugs. It didn't work out too well for me. I always end up becoming my best customer as usual, But, yeah, man. I skipped a lot of school, ended up skipping a lot of school. Of course, by the time I was 13 years old, I ended up going to juvenile hall for the first time. And that had a lot to do with my drug use and not going to school as well. I did 6 months in a fire camp back then, which is in L.A. and called Camp Page. But anyway, it was just like a domino effect, for me as I got older,
Right.
So
So did the trouble start for you in your high school years, or did it?
trouble started for me. It started for me in elementary, really.
Right.
Even though I didn't start using drugs until junior high or elementary, going into junior high, 11, 12 years old. But it was all bad. I mean, I didn't think then, but I think I look back now, and I truly had a problem with addiction, probably at the age of 7 or 8 years old,
Right.
without taking drugs yet.
So like feeling like you don't fit in, right? Like all these things happening to you when you were young, learning to use to numb the pain. It's a recipe for disaster, right? It's a recipe that so many of us fall into. Did you feel like even at that early age, like you were that bad kid, right?
Oh, yeah.
In school, did you carry that label around with you?
Oh yeah, I carried it. I carried a big jacket with me, guilty jacket or poor me kind of jacket, or all that kind of stuff, man. It just everywhere I went, man, I just carried that heavy jacket, that big old bag that of all that stuff, carrying with me all those years. Even though I used drugs to numb it, I still carried that weight.
Yeah.
So.
Well, and that's what I dealing with stuff with my kid and seeing like a lot of the systems around her like failing her in certain ways, right? And trying to explain to people like that look of attitude sometimes you see on a kid's face, like that look could be like, I'm hurt, right? I don't trust you because I've been hurt, or and then they distance themselves from all the things that are there set in place to help them.
Yeah.
But once you've been hurt and you have those trust issues, it's hard.
It's hard to reach out.
Yeah, and so like in that phase, so we're going into like through high school and everything. Like where does this lifestyle end up taking you of using to numb feelings and to disconnect? Like what depths does it take George to? I mean,
it almost took me to death, man. But it started out with those, of course, and then, like I said, juvenile hall. By the time I was 18, I was going to the county jail, of course, going back, my story might go back and forth, but finding ways and means to get more, right, kind of thing. And I was always the type of person that really didn't go out of my comfort kind of zone to rob, steal, pillage, whatever you want to call it. I always stole from my parents, man.
Yeah.
Most of the time. Of course, I stole from society too, but it was always easier to steal from your parents because it was just easier. But for me, man, the straw that broke the camel's back. I'm not trying to get to the end of the story, but the straw that broke the camel's back for me was my mom calling the cops on me for the first time, and that was at the age of 23, 24 years old. And because of that, I broke into her house when I wasn't living there, and I stole a bunch of stuff, and I stole the gun from her, and that gave me my first strike charge, and because of that got me to a program which we'll get into, so yeah.
So like at that time when you're having to break into your mom's house, where like you living on the streets, were you couch surfing, like what does that look like in LA?
Oh man.
I mean, like living out in the street, because I know people hear like about, and this was before the big homeless, epidemic or whatever. Sorensen's also has a Modesto location located at 1433 Coffee Road. Modesto, true value for all your hardware needs. For all of our people out in the Modesto area, please support those who support us. Thank you. But this must have been like the early 90s, the
80s,
streets
90s.
of like, what does that look like for you? I mean,
Man, well, it took me to park benches, man. It took me to driveways. It took me to abandoned houses, friends' houses, connections, this and that. And they're, of course, they got tired of me, man. It's like the connection didn't even want me around when I had money because it was like living in their bathroom for 3 hours. What's he doing in the bathroom for 3 hours? Duh, kind of thing. But, yeah, my mom always had a room for me. She always said, when you get right, there's your room kind of thing. But I always chose to be homeless. You know what I mean?
right.
Like, I'm sure there's thousands of people out there now that are homeless that choose to be homeless. And they may have a room to go to, but they choose to stay out there and keep using drugs. And that's what I chose to do. So
I always because you shared a story one time where we hung out, like that you'd be, pushing your shopping cart, right? and you'd be looking at people on their way to work, and you'd be like, you thought you had it going on, right?
Yeah.
So, what is that insanity?
I kind of missed that shopping cart, though, man. I was a tweaker, too, right? So I'd fix up my shopping cart, kind of chrome up the wheels, and throw some flames on the side, thinking I had a hot rod, right, kind of thing. And just the way the disease talked to me back then, and it, sometimes I would, go break into people's houses or break into people's cars, steal their stereos, or whatever, their pull-outs back then, right? And I would just laugh all the way, ha, ha, this guy's, or just wait for them to go to work and laugh at them because they have to go to work, right? And I'm doing this, and I'm coming up quick kind of thing. And, who would have thought, man, I was the person that should have been laughed at, because
Right.
I was worthless,
But that's how twisted that disease is.
That's how twisted it is,
right?
man.
Like you could be caught up in doing the worst, and that's the funny thing. Like for a lot of us, we knew the difference between right and wrong.
Yeah.
But the disease has you so twisted
Blinded.
up that you just keep doing wrong because that's what's comfortable.
Yeah.
And so going back to that, breaking into mom's house and her calling the cops on you. Was that the straw that broke the camel's back, like you said? I mean,
not so much. I mean, it was kind of a seed that was planted in a way, because that happened in '94 when I got the cops called on me. So I didn't get here until 1995. But if it wasn't for that, I wouldn't have had that hovering over my head. That was going to give me 4 years in state prison. So I thank God that she did that, and I still thank her today, 28 years later. Thanks, even especially in February when it's my birthday month. Thank you, Mom, for finally, letting go and doing what you. Because if it wasn't for her, I probably wouldn't be here. And of course, if it wasn't for the fellowship and the program and recovery, I wouldn't be here today. So yeah.
Yeah, because for a lot of people, like me being a father, you're a father. What your mom had to do was the best thing for you at that point, but as a parent,
It's probably the hardest thing.
takes a lot of guts
Yeah.
to call the cops on your own kid.
Of course, I know that now.
Right.
It's the hardest thing to do. It being a parent, being a grandfather. Yeah, it had to be.
So what does it look like between 94 and 95 for you? Because this is when things, it's unmanageable, right? Or you're
It's not only I knew by then. I knew by the first meeting that my friend took me to that, oh, man, I got a problem. I got a problem here. Although it took all those years, I drank and I used for 13, 14 years, right? And it took that long. My problem started right when I started using drugs, because I was already into finding ways and means to get more at 13, 14 years old, stealing from my mom at that age and this and that. And it took me that long, 13 years, to figure out that George has got a problem, man.
Right.
And you get in the back of your mind and you think you do have a problem, but you're not willing to accept that, that powerlessness and stuff like that. So yeah.
Well, and I think too, it's the fear of change, right? I mean, like,
yeah, who wants to do that?
Yeah, right. Like having to actually do and so, and I know for myself, like the light of hope today is huge, but back then it was just the dimmest little light. Like I couldn't even really see a way out, right? And I knew where you guys were, right? So going back, so like from 94 to 95. Because there had to be some stuff that happened in between there that, I mean, emphasized the fact that, hey, man, I got to change, right?
It's not that I was getting suicidal, but then again, I was, because I was putting anything and everything in my body. But at the age of 19 to 25, I did something that I would never thought I would do. I always told myself I would never put a needle on my arm, right. And I did. You are who you hang around with. From a friend of mine that always used to say that, you are who you hang around with. And I kept hanging around with these guys, and these guys were coming to my house, going in the bathroom for 3 hours at a time. I'm like, one day I opened that door and I'm like, okay, it's time. I want some, kind of thing. And they gave me enough to get started, man. And I was hooked, line and sinker. And it took me 6 years because I was 19 to. Man, that just took me down real quick, and I'm glad that it did. If I look back at my life, I wouldn't change anything that happened, to be honest with you, because I love the life that I have today.
Right.
So yeah.
So what was the the pivot point, right? So what was the point? Was it was the nudge from the judge, right? Like
that's pretty much what broke it down, was the nudge from the judge, but not at the same time. I knew, like I said, I had a problem and I needed help. I just didn't know how to ask for it or to reach my hand out for it, But I thank God for that judge. And I remember when I had a year clean, I went to that judge, and I was able to go see that judge and thank him for putting me in that program that I went through. He was like, "Oh, I remember you. Really? It works?" This is all before all those Prop 36s or whatever was coming around. And, I came in before all that stuff, man. I was given a second chance. He could have put me in 4 years in state prison.
Right.
Because that's where I was going. But my higher power, who I choose to call God today, was working a miracle in my life today. Because I knew if I would have went to prison, like so many people have, and this is not to say that so many people have become institutionalized, and if you're in prison, you can't come out and do this thing. You can, But I'm glad that I got it when I did before getting in prison, because I probably would have become institutionalized like a lot of people that I grew up with, that never came back, that are still locked up in there, that have caught cases inside, So I think about that stuff. Yeah.
So you get the option, either 4 years in prison or do a program.
1 year in a rehab.
And so, like, what does that look like for you walking into this rehabilitation facility? Like, I mean, were you there like, man, I have a second chance, I'm going to get clean? Or was it like, fuck, man, let me get through this year and I can go back to doing what I was doing?
I got to give props to Cider House. That's the program that I went through, and it's no longer there, of course, Norwalk, California. But the minute I walked in, I got to talk about this day. It was actually February 6th of 1995, because I came from the county jail to that program. And a guy named Lonnie picked me up and told me that, long story short, of course, the judge let me go to the rehab, right? Thank God. And he told me that I'm taking you to a 12-step program, blah, 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 long story short. And he actually, my mom didn't want nothing to do with me. Of course, she gave me tough love. Thank God she did. But she gave him $20 to give me for cigarettes back then when I smoked. And we're walking to this guy's car, and he says, "Here's $20 for you. Your mom gave to me to give to you for cigarettes," and so on and stuff. And he goes, "Look, you don't really have to go with me now. You're free as a bird. Or if you want a new way of life, you can come with me. I'm going to take you to this program," right? And there, for a split second in my mind, I almost ran with that $20, right? Okay, if you're giving me that option, that's what my disease tells me, right? But at that moment in my life was the first moment I had a moment of clarity, is what we call it, I guess, something like that. And I just, like, it's like having a near-death experience, like your life flashes before your eyes kind of thing, right? And I just looked within that second, where had my life had taken me at that moment. I was looking sucked up. I was about 130 pounds. I had holes in my skin from using a needle, and then thinking I had it going on, right?
Yeah.
'Cause I had ribs back then.
Yeah.
All I had was ribs, not abs. Anyway, and I told that person, it looks like I'm going with you because there's nothing left for me out here.
Right.
I didn't say it like that, but I burned every bridge, blah, 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 you know. And he said, good choice. So he's working a 12-step on me at that moment, you know. And I remember going to this program, and it was on the grounds of the Metropolitan State Hospital in Norwalk, California. And if anybody knows about a state hospital, loony bin, funny farm, rubber room kind of thing. And I told the guy, I'm like, where are we going again? I'm not crazy. He goes, you sure? You sure about that? I'm like, no, I mean, not suicidal. You sure about that? He goes, have you took a look at yourself lately? I go, yeah. He goes, dude, you're dying. He said, pretty much you're dying. The way you've been using drugs, you've been killing yourself every day. And it just made me realize that I was committing suicide on a daily basis, not just, you know, trying to kill myself, but committing suicide by putting a needle in my arm. Whatever drugs I was using, who cares? I'll be the guinea pig, you know, I'll try it out kind of thing. I was suicidal, but it wasn't I didn't go to a funny farm or anything like that. It was a 12-step program that meetings were coming into for me, you know, and I thank God for Cider House, man. I thank God for that place. It's given me the life that I've got today.
So what does early recovery look like for George? Because now you're in this 12-step program. You have a safe place. So what does that look like for you? Were you accepting of the help that you were getting? Were you defiant? Was it, you know, like, what does that look like?
I was accepting of it, but then again, I was like, man, I got to do this for a year or two because, you know, addicts don't like change, period.
Right.
I didn't want to go to prison, and I sure didn't want to stay clean for the rest of my life. I wanted to try to do this thing for a year, right? Because I needed to be there for a year and go out and celebrate, right? Kind of thing. Yeah, like a normal person. Yeah, right. But the program consists of a detox. I had to still stay in detox from February 6th to February 14th, Valentine's Day. I went to the second phase of the program, which I was grateful for because this place sends you anywhere else and there. So you're lucky if you go to the second phase of the program, which is upstairs called primary, and that's a 60-day program. And that consists of getting up in the morning, having your own little jobs, right, with like 32 other guys, doing groups with your counselor, going to meetings at night, doing it all over again, you know, day after day after day. And then after 60 days, you go to the sober living. And if you have the choice to either go out and get a job or go to what I don't know if they still call it Voc Rehab, and to get a trade. And that's what I did. I took a trade, man. And, you know, I don't work that trade anymore, but I'm grateful for that trade. I got into aerospace way back then, you know, and it was awesome, man. You know, Cider House and the program and the fellowship have taught me to be the person that I am today, you know. What they call that is a productive member of society. Yeah. When they first said those words to me, I was like, what is that? That's the person that I used to laugh at.
Right.
That's what that is. So now I'm not a square or anything like that, but I'm the person that I used to laugh at.
You're the person who used
I'm
to
the
get
person
their
with the
radio.
house going to work every day, you know,
Yeah.
kind of thing. And yeah, it's fucking cool.
You're the person getting your car broken into today.
Actually, I did. Actually, I did quite a few years ago. I'm like, and I started to get all mad. I'm like, oh man, that's a comeback thing right there, karma kind of thing. So I wrote it off, you know.
So like where we hang out, like LA is the epicenter of, you know, like the birthplace. So like, what does that look like going to the rooms? I got to imagine by the time you get into the rooms, you're feeling pretty good. Like, man, I got this thing. And I would imagine you're running some pretty hard liners, some old school, you know.
It was hard. The school of hard knocks back then for me. It was pull no punches, not pat you on the ass kind of thing for me, for the old timers, you know. They're always sitting in the back of the room. I always thought they were like, this is like an Alano club, you know, that I always thought was a bar growing up. It was in the same city that I grew up in too. After the program, I used to go to these meetings a lot, you know, at the Alano club. And I was like, oh, that's what this place is, really? I thought it was like a biker bar because you always saw motorcycles and people that looked like bikers out there. And So yeah, they were school of hard knocks, man. They were the ones that would tell you, sit down, shut up. Everything will get us all loaded kind of shit, I mean, they didn't say sit down and shut up. They said sit down and shut the F up, kind of thing. And kind of stayed around on the resentment my first year just to show those assholes, you know what I mean? And some of these guys, like, there's this guy named Merle that's no longer with us, of course, that had no legs, and he always was smiling. I'm like, the fuck you got to smile about with no legs, you know what I mean? Had 30,000 years of recovery, man. And, some other old timers, man, like Ronnie E., my very first sponsor, and all those guys are gone, man. Ronnie O., Bud McDonald, all those guys are gone. That showed me the way, getting a little teary-eyed, to show me the way that I'm living today, man. I have this alumni meeting that I go to on Zoom every Thursday night, and some of those people are still on there, like my old sponsor's wife's on there, and couple of my brothers, and I'm still the baby with 28 years, man.
Wow.
The February baby, because a bunch of us have February birthdays, and they still call us the babies, and because everybody else has got 30, 40, 50 freaking years of recovery, man. It's just awesome. It's awesome. Yeah.
So how long did it take for you until it clicked and you said, like, I think I could do this. I'm going to stay clean for the rest of my life. I know we make a decision every day, right? It makes it a little more simple. If you say I'm going to stay clean for the rest of my life, that's daunting, but we can stay clean for today. But when was the turning point where you said, like, this is going to be the way I want to live the rest of my life?
Not just the meetings that I was going to, but the fun that I was having in the fellowship. And I think that was around like 6 months clean that I started realizing, man, you can do fun stuff clean. Like, I was playing softball. Like I said, I was never a good baseball player. Softballs are bigger. Yeah, I can hit those. But I was playing softball with the fellas, man. And, we had our own recovery team. And I started, like, getting the grasp of fun and recovery, man, with softball, picnics, barbecues, pool parties, conventions, stuff like that, man. That's what really made me think that, wow, this is it. I never thought I could find a place like this, and I'm still having fun, man. 28 years later, I'm still doing the same things. I'm not playing softball as much as I am because as old as I am, but I did hit a few balls the other day. I'm like, damn, I got to get back into it again. we got to get the team back, dude.
So, and then, like, you talked about, like, being young and never feeling like you had a place that you belonged, feeling different everywhere you went.
This is it, man.
And that was the feeling that you were getting from the fellowship, is I finally found a place where they accept me.
And I don't have to be Toker. That's my old gangster name. I don't have to be Stoner George or whatever, man. I just got to be that's all you guys told me, just be yourself.
Right.
And you guys talked about having a higher power. You must have a higher power, and it doesn't have to be, any Allah, Buddha, Jesus. It could be all those guys kind of thing, and the old timers go, don't. You could pick the doorknob, but it might turn on you.
Right.
But of course, I chose God, man. And 99% of the people in the recovery rooms were talking about God. It could be even get off of drugs, good orderly direction, all these little cliches, man.
Group of druggies.
But I know who my higher group of druggies, yeah, right. And that's how I found my freaking stay here, man. And I continue it. And I continue. We go to concerts together, me and you, man. We play softball together, and that's where it's at. They talk about, we're not a glum lot in other programs, and it's like before I got in recovery, I used to think about kind of what that kind of feeling was, or people how they were, what they do, just stay in their homes and do nothing and be squares in a little box, and it's nothing like that, man. We get to have fun in recovery today, and that's what it's all about. And get to like go to concerts and stuff and remember it.
Yeah.
I've been to quite a few concerts that I didn't remember. I'm like, oh, where'd that stuff come from?
Well, it's funny because even the guy behind the camera over here, we were talking, and I tell him, man, I went to this show, and he's like, you went to a show and you didn't drink, right? Like people can't understand, like, and that's like the funny thing, like, because for me, using was so ingrained in my day-to-day life. 9 times out of 10, I was using before I put my socks on. Mm-hmm. And that's not even an exaggeration, right?
Yeah.
I would get up, eat a few pills, brush my teeth with a Marlboro Red, and then I was ready to get my day rolling. Like that was how, and I never imagined a life without drugs, right? I didn't think I could do anything without getting high, going to the movies clean. It was like it took, any of those things. So like what, like 28 years later, man, like that's a lifetime, right? Like that's a life. Some people don't even get a 28-year life, right? And this is your second life. What keeps you, hanging around the rooms of recovery and passionate about this program? Like, what is it for George that keeps that fire going?
Well, it's not only my life today, of course, it is, but it's seeing the glimmer in the eyes of the newcomers, man, that come in and actually get this thing. And even if they don't get it in the beginning, a lot of us don't get it in the beginning. Some of us keep coming back, right? But yeah, man, that's where it's at. It's service, sponsorship, helping the newcomer, reaching out to the newcomer, even if they don't reach out. I was talking to somebody the other day about it. A lot of us to come in here not wanting to, give hugs and, hey, I need help kind of thing. I'm the type of person that comes up to the person and said, hey, you need help, or hey, you want my number? Give me a call, kind of thing. And that's where it's at. That's not only the step work, but that's also the meat and potatoes of the program,
Yeah. And you know what, like we glossed over something, and I know it's a big part of your story, because you talk about, like, one of the things close to the end was robbing your mother's house, right, and her calling the cops on you. But you have a story, right, of where you were receiving, a medallion for your clean time, and your mom gives you the keys back. You want to tell that story?
Yeah, I can't remember 3 years, 2 years, something like that. It took about a couple of years, 3, 4, 5 years. I was receiving my chip in my cake at a meeting that I used to go to, and she was there as usual, with my daughters that were still back then. They're all in their 30s now. But I swear to God, man, she came up. My daughter handed me the cake, and my mom handed me the key to her house, and she said, I trust you now. And I shit you not, man. I felt like I was like on stage getting the key to this big city of Los Angeles or whatever, And of course, tears were pouring out for me. Tears were pouring out for her. And I hope she remembers this. I'm sure she will, Now she's got the keys to our house. We live together, And that's awesome, man. It's just so awesome. But I reminisce about them special moments,
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, and so like you've done, so much in your life and recovery, like what are some of like the milestones, like the things that you've gotten? And it's not like the property and prestige, but like is it like being able to be a part of your kids' lives? Like what are the big things that recovery's given to you that maybe wouldn't be a big deal to other people, but I mean, like, because we get a different perspective on life today, once you've lost everything, getting these things back.
When it comes to my kids and my grandkids, man, I suit up and show up for every event, even when my daughters were younger. I have a son now that's 14. I'm there at every event. He's really active now, baseball, football, and I'm the go-to dad that takes care of all those issues. When I was in my disease, the only time I'd come around my daughters, back in the early 90s was to try to get something from my mom, really, but today, man, I just, I go to the Christmas plays, the baseball games, the football games, which I got a shit ton of grandkids now, so I'm always fucking busy, right, with 10 grandkids. Actually 11 grandkids, my life is full, man. If I look back, and I don't have time to go back to that old life, even though I'll think from time to time, because it doesn't matter how much clean time you get around here, you'll think, what if I could just do weed, or what if I can just do alcohol? I play the tape, man. One is too many, and 1,000 is never enough, man. I'll be back in the spoon by noon, so to speak, And I'll be selling everything in my house, because I sold a lot of stuff out there. I sold millions of dollars worth of stuff for a nickel, bag, And that's what it would be for me if I was to go back. because I got that. I have a healthy ego and pride that keeps me from going, because it's like, what are they going to think of me, kind of thing. After 28 years, George relapsed. Oh my God, I'd just die. I don't think I'd make it back. And that's something I've told myself for a lot of years.
Yeah.
So yeah.
Well, you are the old timer now.
Oh, jeez.
All right. So
dinosaur.
what would you like somebody that maybe, like stumbled upon this podcast or listening to this podcast and maybe they want to get clean. They don't see the hope, or maybe they don't think they have a problem, or like what bit of advice would you give for somebody that might be out there struggling right now?
Only the person knows if they have a problem deep inside. You got to look within. And if you do, please reach out, because we can't read minds, please reach out. Call hotlines out there if you have to, there's a bunch of hotlines out there. I was just telling somebody the other day, only you know if you have the problem. And once we know you have the problem, we can help, because you're never alone, man, in the fellowship, you're never alone in recovery. Because when I first got here, I remember I used to think about, oh my God, I only did those things to get loaded in the entire world, right? And I was hearing my stories through other people, how they were getting drugs and how they were stealing from their parents and how they were doing this and doing that. I used to cut holes in the bottom of my children's piggy bank to get loaded, kind of thing. I always telling myself I was going to put it back. But I heard somebody else say the same thing one day. I was like, wow, we are not unique, man. Right. We come from different backgrounds, but we have the same thing, man. Addiction, finding ways means to get more, no matter if we're from Park Place or Park Bench, so to speak, So yeah.
Yeah, it's funny because it just popped in my head when you were talking about it, like only you know if you're an addict, right? Mm-hmm. And I started thinking back to what somebody shared on this podcast before, and it's like normal people don't ponder if they're addicts.
Yeah.
Right? Like if there is an inclination that you think maybe I'm an addict, why don't you try and stop for a period of time and see how that works out, right? Yeah. And if you can't, chances are you might have a problem. Yeah. Right? But yeah, man, I think we wrapped it. I mean, is there anything else you got to say? You want to say, George?
I love you, man.
No, I love you too, man. Hey, and this is about time for this, right? Because there's certain people that I look up to in recovery, and you happen to be one of them, right? Like if there isn't guys like you and Jared and people and women like Gabriella that were there the first time I came in, and were there 9 years later, right? When I decided to come back, man, I think this thing didn't work, right? But you guys are that proof, right? You are the people that kept the door open for guys like me to come in, go back out, stumble around some more, go out and bleed some more, and then come back in, man. And it's like, man, because the first time I came in, I thought you guys were all smoking weed on the weekends, right?
I used to think the same thing,
right? And now I know it works, man.
They're not clean for 28 years, no way. They got to be doing a little alcohol on the side. No, man. People stay clean, man. People stay clean. So if you guys want some, come and get some. We got a chair available for you, man.
Right. And chances are if you find that room, you earn that chair.
That's right.
Right. And it's funny, like we started this thing and the microphones didn't quite work. And so I want to say one more thing before we cut out. To the person that's listening in Austria, that blows my mind. Thank you very much. And to everybody listening to this, thank you very much for the support, man. This is my friend George P. And we always end this thing the same way. We end it with a hug. So you owe me a hug, George.
Yeah, I do. Love you, brother.
All right, love you too, man.
Love you guys too.